been difficult in debate last week and even today to be told that we have no courage.
I wouldn't say that you have no courage. I'd say you have no integrity. This is U.S. Representative Louie Gohmert Jr. from Tyler, Texas, trying to find any excuse to avoid even discussing any form of sensible gun legislation. Did I mention that he's Republican? Did I have to? You already knew that much, right? And it becomes especially obvious when he starts into his list of excuses for how mass shootings are caused by anything but guns.
That Democrats, we were told in debate last week, don't want to hear any more about social media, violent video games, Hollywood, mental illness.
These are all things that the rest of the world shares with us, even Hollywood, since American movies show up everywhere, right along with violent video games, mental illness, and social media, as well as fatherlessness and drug use, which Gohmert will add to his list in a moment. Yet, all those other countries who have all these same things like we do don't have anywhere near the level of gun violence that we do, probably because they don't have nearly as many guns as we do. Indeed, there does seem to be a correlation, where the countries with the most guns also have the most gun violence. A seemingly obvious statistic that Republican goobers like Gohmert just can't seem to acknowledge. That maybe the reason we have way more gun violence than everyone else is because we're the only country that has more guns than people. But remember, the Republican Party is not allowed to do or say anything about that. Not because of the First Amendment, but because of their connection to the gun industry and the gun lobby, personified by the National Rifle Association. Similarly, the Republican Party tried to suppress the electric car market because the GOP was effectively bought out by the Koch brothers and has been consequently beholden to the fossil fuel industry. And that's why Republicans passed legislative restrictions and prohibitions against electric cars. It's corporate corruption, and everyone in the GOP had better uniformly support the graft and agenda on all matters. That's why you'll often hear Lindsey Graham or Ted Cruz or Kevin McCarthy say something that is clearly correct, only to deny that they said that or otherwise retract it the next day, because someone reminded them that this is the party propaganda and you had better tote the party line if you want to stay in office. That's why we can't get anything done politically. But that's not what we're talking about today. Instead, we're talking about the dumbest of all excuses that anyone ever made up for why there are mass shootings in schools in the United States. And it's one I hear a lot, but only from Republicans, of course. Listen to what Gohmert blames that on.
And they sure don't want to hear any more about prayers. They're disgusted hearing about prayers.
Because prayers don't do any good, and even Gohmert knows that. When you say that you'll pray for someone, you may as well say that you're going to write a letter to Santa on their behalf, because that'll be just as effective. Except that you're not really going to write that letter, just like you're not really going to pray to God either. And it wouldn't matter if you did. You get the same result either way. And when you say that you're going to pray for someone or that they should pray, all you're saying is that you wish those problems would work themselves out somehow, but that you're not actually going to do anything at all to help, not even to suggest something that might help. Remember, two hands working can do more than 1,000 clasped in prayer. And real-world problems demand real-world solutions, not wishing upon a star, because that's all you're doing. At most, when you pray, you look up at the night sky and unable to focus on what is there because you're looking for something that is not there. So you pick out a favorite star and pretend as if it's paying attention to you, and you start talking to it. Even if there was a God, there would still be a problem with that. Because if you believe that your God is omniscient, that he knows everything, and he's telepathic, that he can hear the prayers in your head, and you believe that he sees the future too, then not only can you not have free will, since the concept of prophecy makes that impossible, but God already knows what your problem is, and he knows whether you're going to pray about it. You can't surprise him because all your actions have been predetermined by him, not you. Even before you decide to pray, he already knew what you would do and why. And he already knows whether he'll answer you and what the answer is. And you should already know that too, just based on the fact that he already knew what the problem would be before it became a problem, yet he didn't do anything about it. So why would he change his mind just because you asked him to? He already knew you would and that he wouldn't, so what's the point in even praying to him? unless you don't already believe that he knew what you were going to do and why. Because there's a few times that God didn't know where Satan had wandered off to, or where Adam and Eve were hiding, or how many righteous people were living in Sodom. And he didn't know that the people he made would be so corrupted to the point that he would lament having created them in the first place, so that he'd have to kill everyone and everything and start all over again to correct his mistake. Just like when God apologized to Jeremiah for treating him so badly. No, he should have apologized to Job too, and Jacob as well. And when God tried to kill Moses, he didn't know that Moses' wife would chop the tip off of their son's dick and throw it at their feet, causing God to change his mind. This and that ridiculous barter session with Abraham both prove that God doesn't always do what he sets out to do, because sometimes he can change his mind. Because he doesn't know the future, which negates the notion of prophecy. And that means maybe you can have free will. And maybe God doesn't already know whether you're going to pray to him or why. And maybe he will fix the problem once he finds out about it from you, since he has to correct other oversights in the past. But the bigger problem with prayer is not that it doesn't work, but that it seems to work the same way for everything. You can pray to any god, even the false ones, and you get the same rate of success as you would if you prayed to Joe Pesci. But it's not just gods. It could be any imaginary being, from your spirit guide or animal totem to the ghost of your dead ancestors to your Jedi master, telepathic aliens, a giant puka, or even an inanimate object. If you really think that any of these things are listening to you, then if you talk to them long enough, eventually they're going to start talking back. That's why religious leaders encourage prayers, because that will convince the populace that someone is listening. You just have to tell the people who to imagine that they're talking to, and tell them that God reports to you whenever they do something wrong, so that they think that they have no secrets from God, and by extension, they have no secrets from the clergy. So they can be more easily manipulated, yoked for labor, and extorted for tithe, and rallied for righteous violence. In principle, that seems to be the perfect way to keep simple people powerless and under clerical control. That's the most prayer even can do. But it doesn't even do that consistently, and it doesn't provide answers or solutions either. For whatever reason, everybody's God hates the same things that they do and doesn't know any more than they do. Funny how that works out. So telling people to pray means exactly the same thing as telling them that they're on their own, because no one's going to do anything to help them.
Don't want to hear any more about fatherlessness, drug use. Look, maybe if we heard more prayers from leaders of this country instead of taking God's name in vain, we wouldn't have the mass killings like we didn't have before prayer was eliminated from school.
First of all, prayer was never taken out of school. Instead, the Supreme Court ruled that teachers could not lead students in prayer, because that would mean imposing the teacher's own religious beliefs onto their students. Because the students in a public school might represent several different religions, and they all have a right to keep with their family's faith and not be indoctrinated into their teacher's beliefs instead. That's according to two cases in 1962 and 63. And there were plenty of school shootings before that, some of them even in Christian schools. But the first time a mass shooter went into an elementary school targeting teachers and students at random didn't happen until a quarter century later in 1988. That was a 19-year-old wielding a .22 caliber pistol with only 9 rounds in it. A year later, in 1989, was the first time a mass shooter used a semi-automatic rifle in an elementary school. The Cleveland elementary shooter fired 105 rounds into a crowd of children playing during recess, killing 5 and injuring 30 others, including a teacher, before killing himself. That's when the current spate of school shootings began. So there is no correlation whatsoever to prayer in schools. Instead, we have a bunch of unoriginal copycats, so many of them that there have been over 2,500 mass shootings since the first or the worst one at Sandy Hook Elementary in 2012. The majority of these shooters were under 21 years old. That's important, but that's not what I wanted to focus on today. Louie Gohmert wants to pretend that this is somehow linked to school prayer, and I think even he must know better than that. Could it be that, like so many other Republicans and all other creationists, that Louie Gohmert is a liar
If you're a Republican, you can't even lie to Congress or lie to an FBI agent, or they're coming after you. They're going to bury you. They're going to put you in the D.C. jail and terrorize and torture you.
You know, maybe that's because lying to Congress and lying to an FBI agent is a federal felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison. Louie?
So Gohmert has just admitted two things. One, that he's dishonest, that he's a casual liar, that he thinks it's okay and even encouraged that he should lie, as if that's the only way a Republican can communicate. He has admitted this unwittingly because he is,
a dummy. So stupid! What a moron.
I mean, just listen to the man talk. You can tell there's not a lot going on up there.
Which, by the way, I realize doesn't seem to bother them. These people don't have shame. They don't have any qualms about being proven outright liars. They are far, far beyond the days where having their credibility absolutely decimated publicly counts for anything. At this point, for Republicans, lying for political gain isn't a career killer, it is a prerequisite.
He's also admitted something else. Again, unwittingly, he's admitted that he is a criminal. That like so many other of the famous Republican senators and congressmen such right now, he has to lie in order to evade prosecution. But he's complaining that he can't lie to investigators because he'll be prosecuted for that too. Again, his admission is unwitting because he is unwitting. He is witless. It's not like he's got any smarts, he don't. The one thing it seems that Gohmert does understand is that once he takes the stand in a trial, he doesn't have a prayer.